All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're stepping way back into the pages of ancient history to unpack a seriously turbulent era. We're looking at the 4 centuries that bridge the gap between the Old and New Testaments. Now, according to the ancient chronicles, this was a time when the heavens seemingly went completely silent, and yet the world down below was being violently and deliberately reshaped. We're going to rely strictly on what the historical texts from that era, like the books of the Maccabees and the writings of Josephus, actually tell us about this dark, fascinating crucible of empires.
Here's our roadmap for today. 1. The era of silence begins. 2. The Greek conquest. 3. Desecration of the temple. 4. The Maccabean rebellion. 5. Rome and the factions. And 6. The silence is broken.
Section 1. The era of silence begins. So picture a really weary Jerusalem around 430 BC. The Israelites had finally returned from their exile in Babylon. They rebuilt the temple, sure, but it was much smaller, way less glorious than before. The city walls were patched up, but the people themselves were just exhausted. Their religious practices had grown, well, kind of cold and routine. And then we hit this absolutely staggering number, 400. According to the ancient text, this represents the exact number of years the heavens went quiet. For 4 entire centuries, not a single new prophet rose up in Israel. No new visions were recorded anywhere. The voice that had literally thundered from Mount Sinai and guided them for over a millennium, it just stopped. The chosen people found themselves seemingly completely alone on the world stage.
But right before that heavy silence fell, the final prophet, Malachi, delivered one last parting promise. He said that a messenger coming in the spirit of Elijah would arrive to prepare the way. This single, unfulfilled promise became the ultimate cliffhanger. It set the stakes, giving the people of Judea something to desperately cling to for the next 400 years.
Section 2. The Greek conquest.
Now, while heaven was silent, the earth was definitely not. That prophetic silence was suddenly filled with the marching boots of a brand new Western empire. In 336 BC, a 20-year-old kid named Alexander the Great kicked off a campaign that would just shatter the known world, conquering everything from Greece all the way to India. But get this, the historian Josephus records a truly wild moment in 332 BC. When Alexander marched on Jerusalem, he didn't destroy it. He actually spared the city. The chronicles say Alexander recognized the Jewish high priest from a prophetic dream he'd had before his conquests even began. Alexander actually bowed to the priest, offered sacrifices, and let the Jews live by their own laws. It was this crazy brief moment of miraculous peace before Alexander suddenly died at just 32, leaving his massive empire to be carved up by his generals.
So, in the fallout of Alexander's death, the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty grabs control of Egypt, and their ruler commissions something totally revolutionary, the Septuagint. Basically, 70 Jewish scholars translated the ancient Hebrew scriptures into Greek, which was the new universal language of the world. Now, why does this matter? Well, without even realizing it, this dynasty inadvertently prepared the globe for a future message. Because for the first time in human history, the sacred text could be read by nearly every nation under heaven. That is a massive game-changer.
Section 3. Desecration of the temple. That relative peace? Yeah, it didn't last. The balance of power shifted violently when the Seleucid dynasty, ruling from Syria up north, ripped control of Judea away from the Egyptians. Enter a king named Antiochus IV. This guy actually stamped his coins with the title God Made Manifest, and he decided that Judaism itself just had to be erased from the map. He issued these terrifyingly precise decrees. He outlawed the Sabbath. He ordered Torah scrolls to be shredded and burned. Women who circumcised their sons were literally murdered. In a mere 3 days, his forces slaughtered 80,000 people and sold another 40,000 into slavery. We're talking about a brutal, systematic campaign of cultural and religious extinction.
And then came the ultimate blow. In 1670 BC, Antiochus fulfilled an older prophecy written by Daniel centuries prior. He marched right into the dwelling place of the Most High, the Holy of Holies, and committed the abomination that makes desolate. He dragged a statue of the Greek god Zeus into the sanctuary, and upon the sacred altar, where only clean animals had been offered for 1,000 years, his soldiers sacrificed a pig. It was, without a doubt, the deepest, most devastating wound imaginable to the Jewish people.
Section 4. The Maccabean Rebellion.
But here's the thing. This extreme suppression didn't break the people. It actually sparked a legendary rebellion. When the king's officers showed up in this quiet little village called Modane demanding pagan sacrifices, an old priest named Mattathias stood before the crowd and basically said, "No way."
He declared that he and his family would live by the covenant of their ancestors, no matter what. When another man stepped up to compromise and make the sacrifice, Mattathias killed him, killed the royal officer, tore down the pagan altar, and fled into the wilderness with his 5 sons. Just like that, the war for survival had officially begun.
The old priest eventually passed away, but his son Judas, famously known as the Hammer Maccabeus, took command. And against all odds, taking on literal war elephants and the massive phalanxes of the Seleucid Empire, these vastly outnumbered rebels absolutely shattered the empire's forces in the mountain passes. Exactly 3 years to the day after the temple was desecrated, Judas and his army miraculously took back Jerusalem. They got right to work. They tore down that profaned altar, built a brand new one from unhewn stones, and got ready to rekindle the sacred menorah.
And this brings us to a story you probably recognize, the origin of Hanukkah. When the victors went to actually light the menorah, they only found one small, uncorrupted jar of sacred oil, barely enough for a single day. Yet, historical records tell us that this tiny amount of oil miraculously burned for 8 full days, which gave them just enough time to press and prepare new oil. Against all odds, for the first time in years, the people of Israel were free.
Section 5. Rome and the Factions.
Unfortunately, that hard-won freedom was pretty fleeting. The descendants of the heroic Maccabees, a dynasty known as the Hasmoneans, ended up corrupting their own legacy. Breaking ancient laws, they illegally crowned themselves both kings and high priests at the same time, mixing royal ambition with sacred office. This absolute corruption deeply fractured the Jewish people into 3 distinct factions. You had the Pharisees, who were teaching strict adherence to the law in everyday life. You had the Sadducees, the wealthy aristocratic priests who ran the temple, but entirely rejected supernatural stuff like angels. And then you had the Essenes. They were so disgusted by the corruption in Jerusalem that they literally dipped out to live in the desert. Fun fact, these are the very people who wrote the famous Dead Sea Scrolls.
So, this bitter division eventually boils over into a civil war between 2 Hasmonean brothers, and they both made a massive, fatal mistake. They asked a rising Western power for help to settle it. Big mistake. In 63 BC, the Roman general Pompey the Great gladly accepted the invitation. He marched right on Jerusalem, breached the walls, slaughtered the priests, and walked straight into the Holy of Holies. The Roman eagle had officially landed on the holiest mountain on earth.
So the crucial takeaway here is this tragic transition of power. The Hasmoneans, a Jewish bloodline that basically compromised everything for power, were ultimately swept aside by Rome. By 37 BC, Rome appointed a complete outsider, an Edomite named Herod the Great, to be king of the Jews. Herod wiped out whatever was left of the Hasmoneans and ruled with a brutal, unquestioning loyalty to the Roman Empire. The people were now firmly trapped under the iron grip of Rome, absolutely desperate for some kind of deliverance.
Section 6. The silence is broken.
For 4 centuries, the people suffered while these massive empires clashed right over their heads. But when we look closely at the ancient texts and the layout of the world at this exact moment, we see something amazing. This dark period of silence was actually a time of incredibly profound architectural and cultural preparation. It's like a giant puzzle coming together. Alexander the Great forced Greek to become a universal spoken language. The Ptolemies gave us the Septuagint, making the scriptures readable to the masses. The violent Roman conquests resulted in an unbelievable network of paved Roman roads connecting the known world. And the displacement of the Jews meant synagogues were established in nearly every village. Completely unknowingly, these warring empires had laid the absolute perfect infrastructure for a message to spread globally at lightning speed.
And right when that global stage was perfectly set, boom, the 400-year silence finally breaks. It happened deep inside the temple of Herod. An angel named Gabriel suddenly appears to an old, childless priest named Zechariah. The angel promises him a son who would go before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah. That right there is the exact fulfillment of Malachi's very last prophecy from 4 long centuries ago. But wait, the preparation didn't end there. Just 6 months later, far, far away from the grandeur of the temple, in a tiny overlooked village called Nazareth, that very same messenger appeared to a young woman named Mary. Gabriel's words to her signaled the ultimate arrival. The exact figure the people had been agonizing and waiting for over the last 400 years had finally come. Let's leave it there for today. When we step back and look at these ancient chronicles, at the empires that rose and fell, at the language, the paved roads, and the unbroken spirit of a people, we really have to ask ourselves, are the periods of deepest silence in history actually moments of the most profound preparation? Based on the texts we've explored today, it certainly seems that what feels like a terrifying historical silence might actually be the quiet sound of the world being radically rebuilt.
Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep exploring.